Welcome to Living the Smarter Science of Slim, where we provide a scientifically proven lifestyle for long-term health and fat loss by eating more and exercising less, but smarter.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everybody, Jonathan Bailor and Carrie Brown back with another Smarter Science of Slim podcast. Actually, Carrie, I was curious to get your thoughts on this. I was debating the other day. So we got the new book coming out, The Calorie Myth. I'm wondering if we should change the name of this show. Not to necessarily The Calorie Myth, but I almost think something that like spans more broadly. That isn't just the name of a book that because people keep saying, where's the book? And the book isn't out. And they can't get it, and they're like, that's great that you're advertising a book that I can't buy. So what do you think we should...
You can pre-order on Amazon?
Well, no.
Or you can't?
Well, regardless, the name of the podcast is the Smarter Science of Slim podcast.
Yes.
And it's in reference to a book titled the same thing, which you cannot purchase. So, I don't know if we should call it, the SANE Show, or, the Sanity Hour, or the Sanity 20 Minutes.
Well, I'm not sure... if we're talking about sanity with food, yes, we could call it the Sanity Hour. But if we're talking about regular sanity, I'm not sure that...
Well, and that's what made me laugh about it, because I was like, this may
hour.
work perfectly, or maybe not at all.
Yeah, we may get some pushback on the Sanity Hour.
Well, folks, that's
but
actually...
the SANE Show.
The SANE Show is up there.
The SANE Show.
So let us know, folks. Post up on the Facebook page. Shoot us something to Twitter, either at Jonathan Bailor. Carrie, what's your Twitter handle?
Carrie Brown. Bleh.
Carrie Brown.
Carrie Brown blog.
Carrie Brown blog, or Facebook/Smarter Science of Slim, which, again, well, shoot, now we're going to have to change everything. I'm going to be busy man on the web. Anyway, all goodness. Let us know if you think we should change the name, and if so, what you think we should change it to, and be nice.
Our listeners are always nice. We have the best listeners.
Well,
hi, by the way. I never said hi earlier.
And speaking of our listeners, Carrie, this actually has nothing to do with our listeners. Speaking of our listeners, you have an interesting fajita story.
Yeah, what does that have to do with our listeners?
I don't know.
It has to do with our listeners because I'm sure we have a lot of listeners who like Mexican or did in a pre-sane life. And I was just recounting to Jonathan how I ordered fajitas for everybody at my day job the other day because we were here really, really late. And how I had the best time because I did not have the rice and beans and I did not have the tortilla, and I had this enormous plate of grilled prawns and grilled chicken and grilled steak and onions and red peppers, and I had all the lettuce and the tomatoes and a big spoonful of guac, and it was a fantastic SANE yumminess, and everybody else chowed down on all the ricey corny fillers, and I had the best time.
Carrie, I love that you said fillers there, because when you told me that story, the thing that made me smile so much is when the way we eat to enjoy long-term fat loss and health is basically take the good stuff, take the stuff that you remember, right? Like you don't go to an Asian restaurant and say, dang, that was good rice. Like it's about the dish on top of the rice. Or when you have fajitas, you're not like, man, that tortilla really made that fajita delicious. It's the other stuff.
It's just a carrier.
It's just a carrier.
It's just a wrapper.
So we're just saying, get to the good stuff and focus on the good stuff and have more of the good stuff.
Unwrap the gift. Don't eat the paper.
Wow, Carrie Brown. Unwrap the gift. I like that. I actually just did a bunch of unwrapping myself. I was at a work event as well, day job event. And there was this big platter of wraps and sandwiches and all that kind of fun stuff. And just, I unwrapped the goodness, and it was, look at you, I'm impressed. Carrie came into the studio today, and she was like, well, I'm a little foggy, and but she's brought her A game. I like it. I think she was just sandbagging.
What a cup of water can do. My brain has just been rehydrated.
I love it. So, next, let us talk about... Carrie, you've covered this in your blog pretty extensively, but it's this issue of healthy fats and sugars and ratios and eating sane baked goods and other treats. Tell us, Carrie Brown. Tell us.
So, on my blog, easiest way to get there, carriebrown.com. I've hands up for the past, I don't know, little while, 3-4 months, I've been kind of posting a lot of desserts and baked goods, muffins and cupcakes and all of that treat kind of stuff. But the reason I've been doing that is so that you can have something to fill that void. If you have a Iodor cupcake void that you now feel like you're being deprived, there's a SANE option for you to try to fill that gap. However, in and of themselves, although all these treats are way, 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 way better and way saner than the regular insane versions, these should be eaten as a treat on top of, after you've eaten all your non-starchy veggies and any fruit and your protein and your fiber and water. Once you've got all that put away, this is the icing on the cake.
Carrie, this is such an important topic, and I think it might even take up the whole rest of the podcast, because I think there's some profound nuance here, and you touched on a bunch of it, and that was, we often hear this term, everything in moderation, and in the upcoming book, I actually talk about that as one of these major myths, because that's actually, we all know that's not true. We don't say smoke in moderation.
Right.
We say smoking causes lung cancer, so to the extent that you can just not smoke. And that doesn't mean you can't ever do anything. It just means do not smoke. So when we talk about everything in moderation, I think what we should actually talk about is everything that is even in the sane ballpark. Everything in the sane ballpark can be enjoyed in moderation, but if it's just like this chemical crap fest that is much more analogous to a drug, and folks, again, the more and more and more we learn about this, the fuzzier the delineation between a drug and something you can buy on your grocery store that's marketed as food is. I mean, they're all just causing chemical reactions in the body. So what I see is so wonderful about what Carrie's doing with like saner cupcakes or saner brownies or saner cheesecakes. She's showing you what you can enjoy in moderation. I actually do not think, and whatever, people might say, John, you've gone too far, just like I don't think we tell people to smoke in moderation. If you have to, there is no eating Little Debbie's Hostess cupcakes in moderation. That's why Carrie's got her sane, brilliant cupcakes. And of course, you don't make them your main dish, but those are the things that you absolutely can, should, and delight in enjoying in moderation.
Yeah, just don't make them the main attraction. Just, if you've had your big salad or whatever, and your sautéed salmon or whatever it is, then just have one of my sane cupcakes to finish it off. And they've got good stuff in them. They've got, well, one, there's no sweeteners or no sugar or variants of, and there's a lot of them have flax and or chia, and there's a lot of coconut or oil. So it's as good as you can get, and still being in the same spectrum. Yeah,
absolutely, and that's the key thing is, we're also not saying you have to eat these. Like, if it's the question is, if you feel like you have this void in your life and you want to fill it, we've got to have ways of doing that are not poisonous. And folks, like, continue to listen to the bonus podcast. If you're out there reading the most recent news around sugar addiction and brain scans that they're doing, within 20 years, I'm telling you right now, mark your calendars, these edible product things, which we're now being told to eat in moderation, we'll look back on that and think that's as silly as saying smoke in moderation. That doesn't mean we can't ever do it. That doesn't mean it should be outlawed. That doesn't mean we should take away people's rights. It just means we don't say smoke in moderation because it's addictive and deadly. These edible products are addictive and deadly. Carrie's saying treats, not. So that's why they need to exist, and that's why they're important to exist. But like she said, they're the treat.
Yeah, and it's like you'll also find, the other thing is, which is very helpful, is that my sane versions are very, very filling. And so most likely the feedback I've had is that one is enough. You don't, like, sometimes you eat a regular cupcake and you could just eat the entire box of them or the entire box of cookies. With these SANE treats that I've made, you find that 2 cookies or 1 cupcake or, one scoop of ice cream, and you're satiated, you're done. A lot of them have protein added to them, so they're very high in protein. And then they've got all the healthy fats, which helps you to feel full. So you then are not sent on this spiral of just eating emptiness to try and fill you up.
And there is a reason that those standard cakes and pastries and cupcakes behave that way. They've been, quite literally, designed to. Pringles says, once you pop, you can't stop. It's not like they're even hiding it. They market the fact that their food is addictive and that you will just eat it until you have to go do something else because you will never just naturally stop. But when you eat food, which is what Carrie provides for us, you get satisfied. And what's even better about that, Carrie, is you actually get satisfied.
Yes.
Like most of us, this is going to sound funny, like to do things to completion. Like if we're looking to be satisfied, we actually want to get satisfied. So if you're looking for a pleasurable, satisfying experience, make sure you're doing it with something that will actually satisfy you. And Carrie's treats, SANE treats, fit that bill.
And I do. I mean, obviously I make a huge effort to use whole, natural, real foods. So you'll also find that they are totally not, and in most cases, not are they not lacking in flavour, but they have way more flavour and way better taste than the regular versions that you're used to eating.
And if you are less sensitive to how good things look and are more willing to do assembly, as I do, I have some SANE treats which are so healthy that they actually don't qualify as SANE treats, but then they become so healthy that Carrie laughs at me and says that just doesn't count as anything. So we could have a separate podcast about that. But Carrie, a similar topic related to this is this idea of balancing healthy sources of fats and healthy sources of sugars, aka certain plants, across your day. And we've talked about this briefly in previous podcasts, but I wanted to just call it out a little bit more, the different flavors of sanity. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So there's only 2. We could get more complicated if we wanted, but we have to eat a baseline of protein and we have to eat a baseline of vegetables on Smarter Science of Slim. Like those are the 2 things that differentiate Smarter Science of Slim and Sanity from other ways of eating. Now, there's 2 things that are up to us in our lifestyle, and that is how much we want to fill in our caloric needs, because you're not going to get your caloric needs met by vegetables. They don't have enough calories in them. You're not going to get it met by protein. Protein is not a fuel source for the body. It's a structural source for the body. It doesn't mean its calories don't count. It just means we don't run on protein. So we got to get it from fat or sugar. And there is no right answer here. There's so much argument on the internet and in nutrition communities. As long as it's coming from sane, whole food, non-toxic sources, whether or not you want to fill that gap with maybe a little bit starchier vegetables, like things like carrots, parsnips, and things like that, I still wouldn't go into the potato arena. Personally, I think it's a little too far. And enjoy maybe some more fruits. That's going to give you more of your calories from carbohydrates, specifically sugar, but in natural, relatively healthy forms. If you prefer not to do that, you would get it more from whole food fibrous fats. So things like coconut and cocoa and chia and flax, and maybe a little bit fattier cuts of ideally grass-fed and non-hormone injected meats. The key thing to take away here, folks, is that please don't waste your time on philosophical debates about which one is right, because there isn't one that's right. There's one that's right for you, and the only way you'll know that is by trying both. And I think there are people in the world that derive more satisfaction from maybe a little bit more of a fruity and sugary sanity. And I think there's some people that derive more pleasure and more results from a little bit more savory and fatty sanity. I happen to be the savory, fatty sanity fan, but there's people that aren't. And as long as you're sane, either way is fine.
However, I remember you saying on a previous podcast, don't mix the two.
Exactly.
Pick one or the other.
And that's the challenge, folks, because oftentimes it's not hard to eat sugar, right? Fruit is delicious. Like you can just, it's fabulous. And fat is delicious. Like we are programmed to crave salt, sugar, and fat. I mean, there's a popular book by that title just came out, or Fat, Salt, and Sugar, something. But salt, really not too much of an issue. The more and more research that comes out, unless you're like a deer and are just licking a block of salt, you're probably not going to have too many problems unless you're eating, again, packaged processed foods because it's just saturated with salt. But those are crazy for other reasons as well. But what you want to avoid doing is like consciously pick, I'm going to do
fat sanity.
Fat pH 18. Let's call it savory sanity versus sweet sanity. And I personally pick savory sanity because there are non-caloric ways that you can make that sweet.
That doesn't mean that Jonathan never eats a blueberry.
No, absolutely. But it also means that for me, I also I use stevia a lot and I use xylitol occasionally because then I can enjoy some sweetness. But to Carrie's point, folks, the key thing you want to avoid, because it's very easy to do this, is eat 6 servings of fruit in a day and then eat really fatty cuts of meats and a couple handfuls of nuts and then eat a whole avocado.
In the same day.
All in the same day, in addition to your vegetables and all that, because your body loves those things, especially if you eat them first. So a healthier strategy and a more sustainable strategy and an equally satisfying strategy, start with the vegetables. You got to get the non-starchy vegetables. Eat them. Then eat your protein and then fill the rest up with whole food fats or fruit. I would pick one or the other, not both. You might be able to do both. My personal recommendation is it's simpler to pick one or the other, and then once you find something that works, maybe then experiment, but pick one or the other.
And, of course, we must always, the caveat is always look at where you are and what your goals are. You know, if you have a lot to lose, then you won't want to do either of those things at this point. You'll want to focus almost exclusively on the non-starchy veggies and the proteins. Mm-hmm. But, you know, if you've reached your goal, if you're where you want to be, if you just want to stay on this gloriously healthy continuum, then, you know, you can relax a little.
The reason I make that point is we so often get our nutrition information in sound bites and bits and pieces. So we might have a friend, lots of friends, who maybe live a more low-carb lifestyle, and they talk about all the fat they eat, and you're like, oh man, all right, well, fat is healthy, and there's a bunch of research saying fat is healthy. And then maybe we have another friend who happens to be a vegan or a vegetarian, but does so in a very sane way, and is very healthy and very happy, and they eat a bunch of fruits. Mm-hmm. And we're like, well, fruits are natural, and they're colorful, so they're good for us. So then we end up eating a high-fat, high-sugar, whole food diet, which is still better than the standard American diet.
Right.
But you are going to have a very hard time burning body fat if you are consuming both a lot of sugar and a lot of fat, even if they're from natural sources, if you're trying to burn fat. Now, if you're in a steady state, that's a totally different thing. But just be aware of this. And again, what's right is what works for you.
Yeah.
So bottom line, if you're happy with what you're doing, keep it up. If you're not, maybe pick savory or sweet and maybe stop trying to do both.
Yep. Good advice.
Reasonable?
Great advice.
All right.
I'm going to sneeze.
Carrie Brown is getting ready to sneeze. Let's do a countdown for her, folks. 3.
I'm not sure I'm that ready, but it's there. It's there. I'm going to blow the microphone away in any minute.
All right. Well, Carrie, while you're prepping to sneeze, the next question has to do with timing. Best times to eat, not eat, exercise, not exercise. Does timing matter?
No. Well, I think from what I've heard from you, it kind of globally no, but there are times where you might want to have your protein shake before or after you work out or stuff like that. But all of this stuff about don't eat after 6 p.m. and all of this is just like, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter nearly as much as we are led to believe.
So
there we go.
There you go. At the end, that doesn't matter as much as... So this might be a helpful thing. I think I just wrote something on a piece of paper here that I like, and we should maybe use in the future. So I think there is, let's call a class of people who are intentionally not after perfection. So
that would be me.
yeah, or like 99% of us, right? Those of us who we're okay. We're like, I'm going to get 80% of the benefit with 20% of the effort. I'm totally down with that. So for individuals in that camp, doesn't matter at all. Doesn't matter at all. Does not matter at all. Except just one nuance. The only time I would say for those individuals it matters is easily digested protein before and after exercising less but smarter. Simply because there's research that shows that, like, one of the reasons we want to do smarter exercise is it triggers a bunch of wonderful hormonal reactions as well as muscle protein synthesis. It's basically like we've opened the floodgates for goodness to happen, and if there's no protein to fuel that,
we're missing a trick.
We're just like, well, you literally, I was talking to Professor Donald Lehman over at the University of Illinois, who's one of literally the foremost protein researchers. Like, the guy freaking has researched protein for 40 years, tens and tens, if not hundreds of studies. And he estimates that anywhere from 30 to 50% of the metabolic benefit that could be accrued from exercise is just lost because we're not able to capitalize on it. So if you're part of the, I would say, vast majority of our audience and of the population in general who wants 80% of the results with 20% of the efforts, it does not matter. Just eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, and make sure it's sane, and get protein before and after your workouts.
The other thing I wanted to say, and this is, I've had this question a lot, and so I do, and I know Jonathan does too, is eat protein before bed because it helps you stay asleep, or it stops you waking up in the middle of the night hungry. So I mentioned that because I've had so many people say to me, I'm not sleeping. Mm-hmm. And I've said, try eating protein right before bed, and that for the most part, that has fixed the problem.
And I have a similar experience where I cherish the meal I eat when I get home from work. And when I say get home from work, I mean like get home at 9:30 at night. And the thought of not eating past a certain time, maybe that's for another podcast, because that's just, there's so many logical problems. Like the idea of not eating past a certain time is predicated on the flawed conscious calories in, calories out model, and it makes sense in that model, but that model is wrong, as we know. So maybe that's a topic for another podcast. But just to finish this question, if you're someone who wants that remaining 20% of benefit and is willing to put in 80% more effort to get it, there's all kinds of things you can do with meal timing. I personally have not done a lot of research on it. I know there is a lot of research on it. I know a lot of people that have a lot of success with intermittent fasting. I know a lot of people that have a lot of success with eating small meals very frequently. In fact, the entire fitness competitor profession and bodybuilding profession has been thriving for decades on small, frequent meals. But intermittent fasting seems to be making a resurgence. So again, if you want to go down this path, I would say just try changing up your eating frequency. Whatever works best for you, stick with that.
But I think the other good thing, which we always say, is eat when you're hungry and eat until you're not.
Absolutely. And if you're eating sane, real, whole foods, you'll be able to trust that. Part of the reason we might feel scared when we hear that seeming commonsensical advice is when we eat non-food.
Right.
We can't trust those instincts, because it's a bit like telling someone who is an alcoholic, just listen to your body. Or someone who smokes cigarettes, will just listen to your body. Well, the problem is your body
has been
broken. It's
yes.
literally broken.
There's been a mutiny.
It literally has. Your brain is literally functioning differently than the brain of someone who has not been exposed to those substances. It's literally different. Your gut bacteria, the flora in your stomach, is literally different than someone. Your hormone levels are actually different. Your insides are different. It's not just calories in, calories out. It's a different thing. So, well, I think that's good stuff, Carrie. And you never sneezed.
I didn't sneeze after all of that.
Well, we're going to get Carrie sneezing, and we'll be back next week with more sanity and eccentricity. Jonathan Bailor, Carrie Brown. We're eating more. We're exercising less. We're doing it smarter, and we're getting ready to sneeze.
See ya.
See ya. Wait, don't stop listening yet. If you like the podcast and if there's other ways we can help you, please join us in the Smarter Science of Slim support group, which is freely available at the Smarter Science of Slim website, smarterscienceofslim.com. There you'll find all kinds of free recipes and success stories and just all kinds of fun stuff like how to help your kids go sane and just great community content.
And just one last thing before you go, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes and up onto Amazon.com and leaving us a review, and then going over to Facebook and liking us, we would hugely appreciate it.